Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilma. Before we continue, let us renew and remind ourselves of our intention. We are truly fortunate to have the opportunity to connect with the glorious Quran. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and those who teach it. So over the last few sessions, we have been going through the Tafseer and the translation of Surah Ya-Sin. And we started off with a summary of some of the aspects of Surah Ya-Sin in the first few verses. And then we went into the story of Habib Najjar, which was the theme of Risalat, the theme of messengership, and we discussed the incident of this particular person. And then we discussed the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, signs of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sun, the moon, the day, the night, animals, and all the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of in Surah Ya-Sin. Now, the whole idea is we need to start putting the puzzle together. Because we recite Surah Ya-Sin every day, or we should be reciting it every day, the whole idea is for us to reflect upon the meaning on a daily basis, because the meaning is profound and it is a summary of our whole deen. So we need to link up that now I'm talking about messengership, now I'm talking about the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then tonight we'll be going into the last theme of Surah Ya-Sin, which is the whole theme of the day of Qiyamah, the day of resurrection. And this is the majority of Surah Ya-Sin focuses on this. And ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing us in the direction and answering the question of those people who objected that after we pass away, how will we be resurrected once again? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now shown us signs of His oneness. And then He mentions two conversations between the believers and the disbelievers. Obviously, the first addressees of these were the Quraysh of Mecca, and this was a conversation between the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Quraysh of Mecca. But it applies to all times. It applies to believers and disbelievers throughout history. And it's also something that we need to focus on, that although it was a conversation between believers and disbelievers, sometimes in our own lives we are also guilty of having similar thoughts that the Quraysh of Makkah had. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing this issue. So He mentions, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. That when it is said to them, the addressees here are the kuffar of Makkah, that when it is said to them, save yourselves from that punishment which is before you and that which will come after you, so that you may receive mercy, then what do? وَمَا تَأْتِيهِم مِّنْ آيَةٍ مِّنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ إِلَّا كَانُوا عَنْهَا مُعْرِضِينَ. That there comes to them no sign from the signs of your Lord, but that they turn away from it. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a conversation. When the disbelievers are told, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to the punishment that is before you, that is the punishment that is going to come to you in this world for the sins that you commit, and وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ, that punishment which is behind you, that punishment which is going to come eventually in the day of Qiyamah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take you to account. So fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, adopt taqwa, and if you adopt taqwa, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, you will then have the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do they say? They turn away from this advice. Now again, like I said, this was the addressee was the Quraysh of Makkah. But you and I have the same situation, that we are told by the learned scholars, adopt taqwa, stay away from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stay away from this action. But what do? We also sometimes are guilty of turning away from it. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the second conversation that is had, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ. That when it is said to them, spend from the provision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you, قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Those who have disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they say to those who have brought iman, أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ, that should we feed those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have fed. Meaning that they are acknowledging the fact, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ نَزَّلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in another surah of the Quran that when you ask them, the disbelievers, that who has provided the rizq for you, who is sending down water from the skies, who has created the heavens and the earth, and they will say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done it. The kuffar and the Quraysh of Mecca, they also acknowledged that these things came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now they are using that against the Sahaba. When they told that they should spend on the poor people, what is their response? Should we feed those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have fed if He wanted to feed them? So it is mentioned that firstly the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were asking the kuffar of Makkah for the poor Sahaba were asking for some sort of assistance because of their poverty, and this was the response that they were given, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is feeding everyone, why do we need to feed you? So this is something that's important, because even in our own lives, we should never believe that it is us that is providing for someone. The system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that there are some people who are poor and some people who are rich. لَيَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا سُخْرِيًّا. This system is there so that some people may take work from other people. This is the divine system, that the poor man is in need of the funds of the rich man, and the rich man is in need of the services of the poor man. So this system of interdependence is part of the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of all of the rizq. In fact, it comes in a hadith that you are given your rizq because of the weak ones among you. So we should never feel, sometimes we may have a child in the home that has got some disability, or a family member that has got some weakness or disability, and we should never feel that this is a burden upon us. In reality, Rasulullah ﷺ is saying that you are being given your rizq as a result of the weak ones among you, as a result of that child that perhaps is disabled that you are providing for. So this was their response, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wished, He could have fed these people. In antum illa fi dalalim mubin, you are but in open error. So this is a brief conversation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings in between the believers and the disbelievers. And then He now draws our attention through a lengthy discussion about the day of Qiyamah. وَيَقُولُونَ مَتَى هَذَا الْوَعْدُ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. The disbelievers, they say that when will this promise come true if you are truthful? What is this promise? This promise is the day of Qiyamah. It's resurrection. When is it going to come through? This was their question. That if you are telling us that we are going to be raised up and we are going to be held to account before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then when is this day going to happen? So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond? مَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً تَأْخُذُهُمْ وَهُمْ يَخِصِّمُونَ. That they are looking for nothing but a single cry, a single shout that will seize them whilst they will be quarreling. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the very first trumpet that will be blown whilst this dunya is in full motion. There will be two blows of the trumpet by Israfil alayhi salam. In fact, it is mentioned that Israfil alayhi salam, the angel, he's already got his lips in front of the trumpet ready to blow it. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the signal that this is now going to be the day of Qiyamah, He is going to blow this trumpet. And this deafening noise will result in all living beings passing away immediately. Everybody will pass away. It is mentioned in the hadith, and here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that they are going to be seized whilst they are engaged in their daily lives. They are engaged in their disputes, in their discussions. The hadith mentions that two people will be buying and selling cloth. There will be a transaction that is happening. The cloth will be laid out and they will be discussing this cloth when the trumpet will be blown, and they will pass away. Another example that is given in the hadith is that there will be somebody that will be plastering his water tank when this trumpet will be blown, and he will also fall dead in the same state. So everything that is living, when this trumpet is blown, that is mentioned here, this first cry, everything is going to fall down dead. And then the second blow of the trumpet, before we get to that, what will happen then? فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ تَوْصِيَةً وَلَا إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. After this trumpet is blown, فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ تَوْصِيَةً, so they will not be able to make a bequest. They will not be able to make a will. Like when a person is about to pass away, he's going to make a will as to what is going to happen to his property. فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ تَوْصِيَةً وَلَا إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Nor will they be able to return to their household. Meaning it's going to be immediate. There's going to be nothing that you can do when that trumpet is blown. Everything now ceases. This world comes to a complete end. Everything that was there comes to a complete end. It's also a lesson for us that whilst Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the trumpet that is going to be blown immediately before the day of Qiyamah, so when the world is going to end, for each and every one of us, there is going to be a minor trumpet that will be blown, and that is going to be the trumpet of death. And in the same way, we will be carrying out our daily lives. We'll be doing whatever we're doing. We're buying, we're selling, we're eating, we're drinking. But in reality, when the angel of death comes, then that time is appointed. فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ فَلَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ. That when the angel of death comes, then it is not possible to hasten that time, nor is it possible to delay it. Precisely on that millisecond, that is the time that our ruh is going to be extracted. So we need to ponder over that. And at that time, if we have not already made out our wills, if we have not already sorted out our affairs, we will also not be able to do anything, nor will we be in a position to say to the angel of death, you know what, let me go home, let me fix and finalize my affairs, let me sort everything out. It's going to be immediate. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the second blowing of the trumpet. وَنُفِخَ فِي السُّورِ. And the horn will be blown again. Some ulama mentioned that, or from the ahadith we glean, that the time period between the first blowing and the second blowing will be 40 years. The time between the first blowing and the second blowing will be 40 years. وَنُفِخَ فِي السُّورِ. So now the horn will be blown. فَإِذَا هُمْ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَنْسِلُونَ. And suddenly they will be rushing out from their graves towards their Lord. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting to us that after everybody passes away, then 40 years later, Israfil will blow the trumpet a second time. And this time, everybody is going to wake up from their graves, and they are going to wake up in a state of confusion. They're going to wake up in a state of shock and alarm. And we'll talk about what is going to be their response. قَالُوا يَا وَيْلَنَا مَنْ بَعَثَنَا مِنْ مَرْقَدِنَا. They will say, woe to us, who has raised us from our sleeping place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in another verse of the Quran, كَأَنَّهُمْ جَرَادٌ مُنْتَشِرٌ. It will be such chaos. They will be like locusts that are dispersed and running around all over the place. If you've ever seen a swarm of locusts and how they are just rushing towards a place, then in the same way, all of mankind is going to wake up in the state of stupor, and they're going to be rushing towards the place of mahshar, the place of reckoning. So they will make this comment that who has raised us from our sleep? Now, what is important to note here is that when they say they have been raised from their sleep, obviously we know that the disbelievers and those who are disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their punishment begins in the grave. It's not something that's only going to happen on the day of Qiyamah. Their punishment begins in the grave. So when they are saying that they were sleeping, why would they say that? What they are referring to is that the horror of this is one opinion, the horror of the day of Qiyamah is going to be such, it's going to be far worse than the punishment that they were receiving in their graves. So it's almost as if what they were experiencing in the graves was nothing. Today this horror is so great, so they are saying as if we were sleeping. The other opinion is that in that interim period of 40 years, nobody will be punished. So it will be like a brief period of respite. From now, if somebody passes away, till the first trumpet is blown, there will be adhab in the qabr. One opinion is that in that interim period of 40 years between the two blowings of the horn, nobody will be punished. Allah Ta'ala knows best. So they will wake up, and then after saying this, a voice, the malaika will say to them, هَذَا مَا وَعَدَ الرَّحْمَنِ وَصَدَقَ الْمُرْسَلُونَ. This is what Ar-Rahman, the all-merciful Allah, had promised, and the messengers had told the truth. Meaning that you are asking, who has woken you up from this stupor? Who has woken you up from this sleep? This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, He promised you. This is what He sent kitabs down to teach you, and He sent messages down to teach you about this particular day. Interestingly, Mufassirin explain this use and this choice of this word Ar-Rahman here, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this word Ar-Rahman, the all-merciful. It is part of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His concern for each and every one of us and our well-being, that He has sent down this elaborate arrangement of wahi, of revelation via the angels, and this has come down to so many thousands of messengers, and this has then been preserved, and it is being passed on to us generation to generation, and the message is the same. In reality, the message is the same, that one day we are going to be standing to account before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know the manual, we know the laws, what we should be doing and what we should not be doing. It's very clear, it has been explained to us, and anyone who has a doubt, there's so many people that are available to clear that doubt for them. Nobody can stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and particularly today in the 21st century, where we have everything available to us. A person has a question, he's got so many people that he can ask if there's a doubt. So with all this arrangement, this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِن كَانَتْ إِلَّا صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً فَإِذَا هُمْ جَمِيعٌ لَدَيْنَا مُحْضَرُونَ. That it will be no more than a single cry, and in no time they will all be assembled before us. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's talked about the end of the world. He's talked about the trumpets that will be blown. He's now bringing us into the scene of the day of Qiyamah. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا وَلَا تُجْزَوْنَ إِلَّا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Then on that day, nobody will be subjected to an injustice in the least. Nobody will be subjected to an injustice in the least. وَلَا تُجْزَوْنَ إِلَّا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. And you will not be recompensed except for what you used to do. You will not be recompensed except for what you used to do. So this is the day of absolute justice. وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we will place the scales of justice. فَلَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. And no soul will be oppressed in the least. If there is a small atom of goodness, then it will be brought forward. If there is a small atom of evil, then it will be brought forward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ تَجِدُ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا عَمِلَتْ. That on that day, every soul will see what it had done brought before it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. That fear that day when you will be returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When on that day, لَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا شَفَاعَةً. Nobody's intercession will be accepted except with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ. And nobody's ransom will be accepted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in another verse of the Quran, on that day, the disbelievers, they will wish to ransom themselves from the fire of Jahannam. And Allah Ta'ala says that even if they have all of the wealth equal to the entire world, take all of the wealth of the world, even if they have that and they bring it, it will not be accepted from them. So on this day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that there will be absolutely no injustice, and everybody is going to be recompensed for exactly what they did. Allah Ta'ala describes in so much of detail the horrors of the day of Qiyamah. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ. That on that day, the skies will be cleft asunder. إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ. The sun will fold up. وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. And the stars will disappear. وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ. The mountains that you see there that are fixed. Think of Mount Everest, think of Mount Kilimanjaro, think of all the different big mountains. These mountains will be moving forward. وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ. The oceans will be ablaze. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains different things. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ. That on that day, when the skies will be split open. So it's a day of a lot of horrors. But on this day, every single person will be given the justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised. Inna ashab al-jannati al-yawma fi shughulin fakihun. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing our attention towards the people of Jannah. And there is a description, a small description of the people of Jannah, and then a description of the people of Jahannam. That on that day, verily the people of paradise are engaged today in activities, happily enjoying them. Inna ashab al-jannah, verily the people of Jannah on this day, fi shughulin fakihun. In reality, if you have to translate this, they will be enjoying their occupation. Fi shughul actually refers to one's occupation. If you go to an Arab land and you ask somebody, you ask him, Aina shughul, or Aina shughluk, what's your occupation? What do you do? Ana muhasibun, I'm an accountant. Or Ana muhandis, I'm an engineer. Or Ana tajir, I'm a businessman. So shughul actually refers to a person's occupation. Beautifully, Allah Ta'ala is telling us that your occupation is going to be enjoyment. In Jannah, there's going to be no work. You don't have to wake up in the morning and go to work. You won't have to go to bed at 8 o'clock in the evening so you can be at the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. There's no work. Nobody's going to get tired. But in reality, the occupation is going to be enjoyment. The occupation, like when you go on holiday, what do you have to do on holiday? You have to enjoy yourself. In Jannah, the occupation is going to be enjoyment. Hum wa azwajuhum fi dhilalin ala al-ara'iki muttaki'un. This one is very interesting. They and their spouses, fi dhilalin, they will be under canopies. They will be under canopies. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about those people that they will have their spouses, meaning their wives from this dunya. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also referring to the huri'een, the damsels of Jannah that will be surrounding these people. And they will be under canopies, meaning that the sun is not going to affect them. Alal araiki muttaki'un, they're going to be reclining and relaxing on couches. So in different parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the scene in Jannah. Fiha aynun jariyah, that there's going to be springs that are flowing. Fiha sururum marfu'ah, there's going to be elevated couches or beds. Wa namariqu masfufa, cushions are going to be laid out. وَزَرَابِيُّ مَبْثُوثًا, there's going to be carpets that are going to be spread out for these people. They're going to be reclining and talking to one another. هُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُهُمْ فِي ظِلَالٍ عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ مُتَّكِئُونَ لَهُمْ فِيهَا فَاكِهَةٌ وَلَهُمْ مَا يَدَّعُونَ. For them there are fruits, and for them there is whatever they ask for. So there will be different types of fruit in Jannah. The types of fruit in Jannah, although they may share similar names to that in this world, but the taste is going to be something else. It comes in a hadith, one bunch of grapes, 70,000 grapes. Each grape is going to have a different flavor to the other, and each one is going to be better than the previous one. There's going to be fiha anharum min ma'in ghayri asin. There's going to be rivers of water that will never turn brackish. There's going to be rivers of milk that will never spoil. Rivers of honey that will never spoil. So different types of descriptions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. وَلَهُمْ مَا يَدَّعُونَ, and for them is whatever they call out for. Now this, interestingly, this word يَدَّعُونَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses it. And here it means that you are going to call for something, or you're going to wish for something. The Quran has not used the word yas'alun. Yas'alun means to ask. So if you go somewhere and he says that yas'alun, he asked for something. So there's a possibility he's going to get it, or he's not going to get it. Here it's not a case of whether you're going to get it or not. You're just going to call for it. For example, in your home, when you say to somebody that is there, bring me a glass of water. It's not a question, do you have a glass of water? It's a question of that glass of water should be brought for me. So whatever you wish for in Jannah. In one hadith it is mentioned that you will see a bird that will be flying, and you will desire that bird to be, you will desire to eat that bird. So you will be asked, do you want it fried? Do you want it fried? Do you want it broiled? And immediately it will be there in front of you. There's going to be no time to now kill the bird, to skin the bird, to cook the bird, etc. You want it, it's going to be there. So this very interesting choice of words, وَلَهُمْ مَا يَدَّعُونَ. And then most importantly, salamun قَوْلًا مِّن رَبِّ الرَّحِيمِ. Peace upon you. Salamun alaykum is the word from the from merciful Lord. This is the word from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is all merciful. This word of peace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to say to us. It is mentioned that after all the inhabitants of Jannah have come in, and now everybody has settled down, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will make an announcement. And He will say, and He will ask the people that, would you like something more? And they will say that, oh Allah, you forgave us, you brought us into Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those. That you brought us here, what more can we ask for? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then say that I am going to give you my pleasure, and now you will have an opportunity to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recite Quran as well. In fact, when He recites Quran in Jannah, we recite Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the all merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recite Anar Rahmanur Rahim. I am the most merciful, the all merciful. So this peace, this is going to be the greatest, this vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be the greatest thing that a person is going to be able to get on the day of Qiyamah. And now the attention focuses to the other side. We spoke about the people of Jannah. Now we have the people of Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect each and every one of us. وَامْتَازُوا الْيَوْمَ أَيُّهَا الْمُجْرِمُونَ. And it will be said to the disbelievers, to the criminals, that get apart from the believers today, O criminals, or O guilty ones. وَامْتَازُوا الْيَوْمَ. That get away, differentiate yourselves on this day, O criminals. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make different groups. After this whole, everyone wakes up from their graves and rushes towards the place of the mahshar, or the place where everyone is going to be gathered. Then everyone is going to be divided. The A team, the B team, the C team, the A seeding, the B seeding, the C seeding. So you're going to have the believers on one side and the disbelievers on the other side. Then from amongst the believers, you're going to have the pious on the one side, and you're going to have those who are not so pious on the other side. Remember, this is going to be a very long day. كَانَ مِقْدَارُهُ 50,000 سَنَةً. It's going to be a day of 50,000 years. Extremely, extremely long. But for the pious believer, it will be like the time between two salahs. Very short. Very, very short. And the believer, the pious believer, he's going to be in comfort, he's going to be in relaxation, he's going to be on a VIP status. May Allah Ta'ala make us from amongst those. So what will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say to them? أَلَمْ أَعْهَدْ إِلَيْكُمْ يَا بَنِي آدَمَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. That did I not direct you, O children of Adam, that you must not worship shaitan? Innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. He is an open enemy for you. And what should you do? وَأَنْ يَعْبُدُونِي هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. And that you must worship me, because this is the straight path. What did shaitan do all this time? وَلَقَدْ أَضَلَّ مِنْكُمْ جِبِلًّا كَثِيرًا أَفَلَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْقِلُونَ. That he had misguided so many people from amongst you. So did you not have sense? هَذِهِ جَهَنَّمُ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ. This is the Jahannam of which you were consistently warned. إِسْلَوْهَا الْيَوْمَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ. Enter it today because you were continually denying the truth. Enter it today because you were continually denying the truth. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now begun to talk about the situation of the disbelievers, where they will now be shown Jahannam, and where they now realize that they are actually going to be entering into Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect each and every one of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those who will be entering into Jannah. To summarize today, we discussed the two conversations between the believers and the disbelievers, and then we went into the description of how the world will end and what will happen thereafter, where everybody is going to wake up from their graves and rush to the place of gathering. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the condition of the righteous believers, and as we started today and will continue next week, the description of the disbelievers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq to understand. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.